None of my babies slept well and through the night because they were naturally good sleepers, and I didn't get lucky 3 times. What changed everything for me was realizing something I'd never heard before, that night sleep isn't built at night. It's actually built during the day. By around 12 weeks, all 3 of my babies were sleeping 10 to 12 hours at night. Not because I ignored them or pushed anything on them too early, but because I followed a daytime rhythm that most parents are never shown. If you're exhausted, overwhelmed, and wondering why nothing you've tried seemed to work, I've made this video for you. Today, I want to share how all 3 of my babies were sleeping through the night by around 12 weeks old. If you're a new parent, nights can feel really heavy. You're exhausted, you've tried, and you still wonder why it's not working. We did all the conventional things. We had a bedtime routine, bath, book, songs. We made sure the room was dark and cool, and we focused on feeding well during the day so that they wouldn't go hungry at night. None of that was wrong, it just wasn't enough for us. For our first 2 babies, my husband and I cared for them completely on our own. After trying so many night-focused strategies, I realized that something important was missing here. Once I understood how daytime rhythm affects night sleep, everything changed. I'm Shuri, a mom of 3, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through the system I used, step by step, starting with the one idea that made everything click. Before I had kids, I thought that sleep was something that you will fix at night because we sleep at night. Night wakings, night feedings, and night routine. And that's where all my attention went. What surprised me was realizing that night sleep isn't built at night. It's actually built during the day. Babies are not born knowing how to organize their days and nights, but they do have a biological need for rhythm. And when daytime feeding, awake time, and naps feel scattered all over the place, even when you're trying your best, nighttime tends to feel long and fragile. I still remember those early days with our first boy when days and nights seemed really blurry for us. Sometimes we feed our baby one time in a 3-hour period, and then suddenly 3 scattered feeds in the next few hours. I pump exclusively, so after a long episode of feeding, burping, changing, baby napping, and me pumping, shortly afterwards baby cries again and we started panicking, and the cycle repeats regardless of day or night. Those days were dreadful to say the least, and my husband and my mental and physical health deteriorated fast. We tried doing everything we could to respond to our baby's needs, but we still struggled day and night. Especially at night, I was tired, mentally drained, and constantly searching for answers. Like many parents, I watched countless videos and read many books about baby sleep. And what surprised me was that most of them follow the exact same idea, and for us, it just didn't work. Eventually, I came across a system that was rarely talked about, but it finally made everything click. A system holding all the pieces together. This system is called Parent-Directed Feeding, or PDF. It is a 24-hour approach to infant care that helps create a predictable pattern for babies while staying responsive to their needs. I've used the same approach with all of my babies from day 1, and it was the first time that nighttime sleep started to feel understandable and less scary for me. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how the system works, why it supports night sleep, and how we applied it step by step. But before we talk about schedules or charts, there's one key idea we need to understand first. The framework I followed is called Parent-Directed Feeding, PDF, and at its heart, it's built around 3 very ordinary things that baby do all day long: feeding, awake time, and sleep. What mattered for us wasn't inventing something new. It was keeping those 3 in a consistent order: feed, wake, sleep, and repeat. When I started following and protecting that order, everything else became easier. My baby fed more calmly, his awake time felt more intentional, and his sleep, especially naps, felt more predictable. Babies don't automatically connect those steps on their own. They rely on us to gently guide the rhythm for them, especially in the early weeks. And I also learned that how a feed happens matters just as much as when. When feeds were full and unrushed, my babies had better awake time. Better awake time leads to better nap, and better nap meant that the next feed would go more smoothly. This daytime routine quietly support our baby's nighttime sleep in a really powerful way, which helped us getting a longer and uninterrupted sleep at night so we can function better in the day. Not only did my body get a chance to rest and recover, my days and nights also became more predictable with a clearer routine. But more importantly, it boosted my confidence as a new parent and helped me stay responsive to my baby's needs. To really trust this though, I had to understand what was happening inside my baby's body as they grow. When my first baby was born, I remember thinking, How is my baby sleeping so much and yet I'm never sleeping? What I didn't know yet was that newborn sleep looked nothing like the adult sleep that we have. In the first couple of weeks, babies often sleep 17 to 19 hours a day, but it's broken into many short pieces. Around 3 to 5 weeks, babies are still napping often, but total sleep drops a little. They still need 16 to 18 hours of sleep a day. Around 6 to 7 weeks, naps slowly begin to consolidate. 15 to 18 hours of sleep is needed. And by 8 to 12 weeks, many babies are able of taking fewer but longer naps, and they sleep anywhere from 14 to 17 hours in a day. Early on, frequent feeds are necessary. As babies grow, feeds naturally became fuller and spaced out. When I finally understood this progression, everything connected. My babies were sleeping more, not because I was doing something extreme to push them to sleep through the night. They were sleeping more efficiently because their bodies were ready. And that was why, for us, longer stretches at night emerged naturally. Now I want to show you what this looked like for us in a real day. And before I do, I want to say this clearly. These are not rules. These are reference points. They're something to lean on, especially when you're tired. This was my timetable in the early months. These are handwritten notes that I pasted in the kitchen for easy reference. We also have another set in the bedroom for a quick reference too. I'll put it on the screen so you can see it. Not to copy exactly, but to understand the rhythm. I'm going to walk you through what a typical day looked like for us at different stages by 12 weeks. In those first couple of weeks, everything felt short and honestly a little foggy. A full feed-wake period was usually about 30 to 50 minutes, and that included feeding, some burping, a diaper change, or 2 or 3 diaper changes, maybe a cuddle on the couch. Bath time is included too. After that, my baby would usually sleep for about 1.5 to 2 hours. When I started thinking of the day as feed, a little time together, then sleep, something shifted emotionally for me. The day stopped feeling like one long blur of guessing. Instead of thinking, why are you crying now? What do you need? I will calmly say, okay, we've eaten, we've been awake for a while, and now it's time to rest. During the day, feeds often land around 7 in the morning, then 9:30, noon, 2:30, 5, and 8. In the late evening, around 11, I do a change, quiet feed, and put my baby back down. Overnight, I let him wake naturally, making sure he didn't go longer than 4 hours without feeding in those very early weeks. Between 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., they usually wake up 1 or 2 times to feed. Those overnight feeds were simple. Minimal light, very dim, no talking, just feed, burp, change, back down in the crib. At this stage, I wasn't chasing long sleep. I was just teaching the order and giving myself permission to keep things calm and simple. Between 3 to 5 weeks, I started noticing small changes, and emotionally, this was a tender stage. My baby would stay awake for a little longer. His feeding and wake time stretched closer to 30 to 60 minutes. Sleep was still around 1.5 to 2 hours. But now, the full cycle felt more like 2.5 to 3 hours. The days are still similar, feeds around 7, 9:30, noon, 2:30, 5, and 8. But something interesting started happening at night. That too, middle of the night feeds, often around 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. began to shift closer and merge into one. Our reference point was a single middle of the night feed around 3 a.m. Some nights it came later and some nights it felt shorter. We just made it stay fluid during week 3 to 5 or into week 6. Knowing about merging ahead of time made such a difference. Instead of panicking, I could say, this might be a transition. Let's watch and see. That knowledge alone made the stage feel far less scary. By 6 to 10 weeks, things usually began to open up. And this is where I personally felt the biggest emotional relief. Feeds were fuller, usually around 30 minutes. Wake time stretches to 30 to 50 minutes. Sleep cycle stayed for about 1.5 to 2 hours. And now a full cycle lasts anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 hours. Mornings often start around 6:30 or 7. Feeds landed around 9:30, 12:30, 3:30, 5:30 or 6. The evening feed moved a little earlier, around 8 or 8:30. The late evening feed settled around 10:30 or 11. During week 6 to 10, mostly closer to week 10 for all 3 of my babies, the middle of the night feeds simply faded away. I remember having my alarm set around that time to wake up for the middle of the night feed. I was lying there half awake, listening, wondering, is this okay? Is it happening? That feeling, the disbelief mixed with relief, it's something I'll never forget. And it just happened not because I decided to drop it or I tried to push through crying, but because our consistent daytime rhythm finally supported our baby's longer nighttime sleep. Between 10 to 12 weeks, the daytime structure stayed mostly the same, but nighttime changed dramatically. Babies at this stage are often capable of sleeping 10 to 12 hours straight. The last feed of the night naturally falls 10 to 12 hours before the first morning feed. So if the late night feed happens around 10:30, the next feed should land around 6:30 or 7 in the morning. What I noticed was while nights stretched longer, daytime wake time became fuller and more engaged too. So I use an app on my phone to keep track of his wake time during the day, so I have a better idea when I reference the baby's sleep needs. At this point, the rhythm has taken a very steady and predictable shape, and I felt like I was more restful, not just for baby, but for me. I wasn't guessing anymore, and I was embracing myself during the long nights, and I finally felt like the day was working with us, not against us. For breastfeeding moms, this is also when you should stay mindful of your milk supply. Some moms keep that 10:30 to 11 p.m. feeding for a little longer, and some choose to pump before bed. I pump exclusively and bottle fed all my 3 babies, and I just make sure I pump before bed and again before the first morning feed. And if you're listening to this thinking, my baby isn't quite there yet, I want you to know that is completely okay. I'll share how our babies actually moved from one stage to the next and how to support that shift without pressure or fear. Because this transition, merging, is where most parents feel the most unsure and when the biggest change can usually happen. This part made me the most nervous, even for the 3rd time. Merging is simply what happens when a baby drops a feeding, not because we force it, but because their body is ready. Either they're sleeping longer or they're staying awake longer, feeding more fully during the day. For many babies following a consistent daytime rhythm, merging happens very naturally. Somewhere between 7 to 10 weeks, one night they just slept through. With my 3 babies, this looks different each time. One baby stopped waking almost overnight, and another took almost a week, or maybe even 2 weeks. Every time I had many moments of lying there, half awake, listening, and wondering if I should do something. I kept wondering, like, should I warm milk? Should I feed? Am I messing this up? What helped me was understanding this discomfort often means that you are right on the edge of a merge, not a setback. Sometimes our babies just need a little nudge finishing that adjustment. During this transition, if your baby wakes around the same time for several nights in a row, that's often a sign that their internal clock is a little stuck. I remember feeling discouraged during this phase, thinking we had somehow went backwards. But this is actually a very normal part of the process, and it's where gentle guidance can make a big difference. To support a merge, the first thing I always tried was simply giving my baby a little chance to resettle. That doesn't mean leaving them alone or ignoring them. I actually stayed close. I listened, I checked in, and sometimes I'd pat on their back or rest my hand on them, just enough to let them know that I'm here, without fully restarting their feeding cycle. For many babies, after 3 or 4 nights, the sleep-wake clock adjusts on its own, and that waking just disappears. The second way is gently shift that late night feeding a little later, closer to 11 p.m. or even midnight. I remember feeling nervous doing this at first, like I was changing something already worked. But once my baby began slipping through to the morning, I could slowly move that feeding back earlier again in 15 to 30 minutes increments at a time, until it landed where I wanted to be, usually around 10:30 or 11. The third way, and the one I used only when the waking felt very stuck, is called a backward slide. If a baby woke very predictably at, say, 2 a.m., I will briefly wake them up at 1:30 and feed them. And if they then slept through to the morning, that told me that we're on the right track. So after a few nights of doing that, I'd move that feeding earlier again, from 1:30 to 1 a.m. and then 12:30, until it folded back into our late night feed. What mattered most here wasn't doing it perfectly. It was staying consistent once a new rhythm settles. There were a few principles that I kept reminding myself of during this stage, especially on those nights when I felt unsure. First is, I couldn't simply decide one day just to simply drop a feeding because I wanted more sleep. My baby had to be physically ready. And second is, in the early weeks, cycles could look very similar, but as babies grow, one cycle might last 2.5 hours and the next stretches to 3.5 hours. And that's completely normal. Once a baby starts sleeping through the night, the first morning feed and the last evening feed becomes the anchors of the day. Everything else fits between them. And fourth, all babies merge, but not on the same timeline. Comparing with other babies will only make the stage harder for us emotionally. I avoided comparing to others and just focus on my own. And siblings are different from each other, so I avoid comparing one brother to another. Some merges happen overnight, but most take almost a week or even 2 weeks to settle. Any single rough night during that period didn't mean that we failed. And finally, this works the same way whether you're bottle feed or breastfeed. And if the stage feels uncomfortable or emotionally heavy, it doesn't mean you are doing something wrong. In my experience, it usually means that we're on the right track and we're just on the edge of a big shift. And before we wrap up, I want to talk about a few subtle things that can quietly undo our progress of supporting our babies to reach their nighttime sleep. They're usually small shifts, the kind that happen when you are just tired and trying to get through the day. Once I learned what they are, it became much easier to fix. The most important thing to protect is the order of the day. Feed, wake, sleep. I'd be honest, this slipped for us sometimes, for every baby. Sometimes it was because I was trying to stretch a nap because I really needed to get something done. And sometimes because we're out for the day or a big part of the day. And sometimes because we're just tired. If it happens once or twice, it's not a big deal. But when it repeats over several days, the rhythm might start to unravel. Because shorter wake time leads to lighter sleep. Lighter sleep leads to shorter naps. And shorter naps leads to rushed feeds. And all of a sudden, their nighttime rhythm is no longer consistent. In my experience, fixing the order of the feed, wake, sleep usually fixes the night. When my baby started waking earlier than expected, my instinct was to change everything at once. But that only made things worse. What actually helped me was to slow down and walk through 4 areas, one by one. First, I look at my baby. Is he genuinely hungry? Is he too warm or too cold? Is he dealing with gas or tummy ache? Is he right in the middle of a sleep transition or ready for the next merge? Next, I have a look at myself. Has his feeds been rushed? And for breastfeeding mom especially, has my diet changed and was I taking new medication? Then I review the day. Was his wake time too short or too stimulating? Did his first feed of the day happen later than usual? Did his feed, wake, sleep order somehow flipped around? And finally, I checked his environment. Was there enough daylight during the day? And was the room dark enough at night? And were there any visual distractions in the crib? And sometimes it might just be a growth spurt. It's temporary and uncomfortable, but it's completely normal. What I want you to hear is this. When sleep gets bumpy, it usually means that something is changing. Most of the time, the answer isn't doing more. It's noticing more. If you're still here, thank you. I know this was a lot, especially if you're tired or watching this late at night. What helped me most during that stage wasn't actually doing more. It was understanding more. Once babies and our daytime rhythm made sense, our nighttime just followed the same way. I hope this video gave you some clarity and maybe a little relief. Wherever you are in this season, I hope tonight feels lighter.